and welcome to Telewizja Republika. We are starting off with the news from the Kharkiv theater, where the Russian offensive that started on May 10th seems to have ground to a halt. The lack of serious gains for Putler's henchmen, they're coincided with the influx of some of the promised Western weapons. Seems like the weapons made it to the front line just in time. Stopping the advance of Russians in Kharkiv is just one of the successful moves of the Ukrainian army made lately. The attacks on Russian installations in Crimea is another. And we'll talk about it, with our regular guest, Joe Lindsley, in a minute. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been on a diplomatic marathon, meeting with US and Singaporean officials at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore. Zelensky discussed Ukraine's battlefield needs, including additional air defense systems, and emphasized the importance of being able to strike Russian military targets near Kharkiv Oblast. He also highlighted Ukraine's interest in strengthening ties with Singapore and ASEAN countries. On the horizon, the Global Peace Summit is set to take place at the Bergenstock Resort in Switzerland on June 15-16. Zelensky announced that 106 countries have confirmed their participation, with the notable absence of Russia and China. Zelensky criticized China for actively discouraging countries from attending the summit, a move that only reinforces China's behind-the-back support for Russia in the conflict. The summit aims to address key areas such as energy security, the exchange of captivities, the return of deported children, and global food security. All of them are important from the standpoint of the ongoing Russian war against Ukraine. In a report, the New York Times revealed on June 2nd the forced relocation of 46 children from a foster home in Kherson by Russian officials. The investigation details how these children were taken to Crimea, given Russian identities, and listed for adoption in Russia. Nothing new. Russian barbarians are doing it over and over again. This act, seen as a violation of the Convention of the Rights of the Child, is another grim chapter in Russia's barbaric tactics against Ukraine. Legal experts argue that these actions may amount to a war crime, another one. Meanwhile, the US has lifted some restrictions on Ukraine's use of US weapons against Russian targets, allowing strikes near Kharkiv and Sumy Oblast. However, this move is critiqued as too little, too late. The restrictions on long-range ATACMS missiles remain, limiting Ukraine's ability to fully defend itself and counter Russian aggression effectively. This policy shift follows the criticism from a group of Republican congressmen who argue that the decision should have been made before Russia's recent offensive in Kharkiv, not after. The partial lifting of restrictions will allow Ukraine to better protect Kharkiv city and northern Kharkiv Oblast from Russian airstrikes, but it falls short of what is needed for a comprehensive defense strategy. You can join us on rackracon.com. You'll find our YouTube channel over there. You can leave us your email. We'll get back to you with our reports on the ongoing war against the Western civilization that we try to cover on this program, focusing not only on Russian aggression against Ukraine. My name is Michał, and this is Rackracon, and we roll in.
Are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go!
It's Monday, so Joe Lindsley is again on Telewizja Republika. Joe, welcome back. Great to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you. Hello from Lviv.
So it looks like, at least this is what comes from the official claims that we've heard, that there was a kind of a green light for using the American weapons outside the territory of Ukraine. And even if we're not talking about the long range and long distance behind the border, it looks like a breakthrough in terms of some kind of official allowance to do it. What's your take on this, and what does it mean?
Well, indeed, I mean, you know, for a long time, Ukrainians, especially people in Kharkiv city and Kharkiv region, have been, which is only 30, that city is about 25 to 30 miles from Russia. They've been saying this is ridiculous that we can't hit Russians on Russian soil Kharkiv was a sitting duck. When we had a month ago that incursion of the Russians into Kharkiv region, a big reason for that was Ukrainians cannot use any weapons or munitions produced in America to hit Russians on Russian soil. And so they had to wait until the Russians entered into Ukraine. They could only use Ukrainian-made drones to fight back. And the Russians intensified their attacks in Kharkiv city the past weeks. It's been really, really bad. But the way that bad news was made into something positive, the chorus became very loud to give Ukraine permission to fight back. And Republicans and Democrats in Washington began to be much more vocal about this, saying this doesn't make sense. If we're going to spend money on helping Ukraine, why can't we let them win? Why do we let Russians attack a city like Kharkiv? And so last week, at last, the Biden White House, I think, seemingly in response to this pressure, gave permission for Ukraine to in a limited way to hit Russian military targets on Russian soil only near Kharkiv city and Kharkiv region. Interestingly, that news was announced the same day. It was in the same 24 hours as Donald Trump's conviction. And so in some ways, I don't think that was a coincidental. I mean, Ukraine had been waiting for that news for so long. And what we've seen in the past days, plenty of indications from videos from the front lines. Ukrainians are using HIMARS, the high mobility rocket launchers, many of which were provided to Ukraine in 2022. They're using them to hit Russian missile launch points on Russian soil. So this is great. Now we're going to wait and see, is this going to make Kharkiv city safer? I mean, it has been actually it's been quieter the past few days. I was just talking with an American who was in Kharkiv, and, I would say maybe a week ago, because of the intense Russian attacks, people were starting to get scared in Kharkiv, which is not a normal emotion there because they've been through hell. But it was making people a bit frightened to go outside. But what I heard that over the weekend, this American who was there wrote, "What a special city. Amazing to see so many families out in the parks on Friday. Such defiance." But this is a coincidence with now Ukrainians are able to hit back using the HIMARS to hit Russian attack points. Now, but then what's emerged now is that it seems that the White House has not given Ukraine permission to use the ATACMS, to use these longer range missiles, rocket launchers, that these were provided as a result of the Republican and Democrat package that was finally passed by Congress. Mike Johnson put pressure on the White House to send these weapons. Ukrainians have used them the past weeks to hit Russian military targets on Ukrainian soil, but they still are forbidden from using them to hit targets on Russian soil. So this is a big question. Why would the White House give permission for only one type of weapon and not for the attack?
And what do you make of it? What's the reason for this?
Well, I think here's where, and especially the duty of journalists and the press, is never to let up scrutiny. Because when the White House says, "Oh, now we give permission for Ukraine to hit back," well, the details matter. And I think there's a tendency among people who support Ukraine to say, "Oh, right now we just need to be very thankful. Let's not be skeptical. Let's praise the White House for finally doing this," which is good. But you have to make sure you see the details. And this is also the question with F-16s. Like, this was also big news in the past week. Sweden, the Kingdom of Sweden, has really, they feel the threat from Russia too, and they've really stepped up their efforts to help Ukraine. Sweden was almost due to send its homemade, it's Swedish-made Gripen fighter jets made by the Saab company. So Sweden doesn't have to, does not need U.S. permission to send it. They're ready to send these to Ukraine. And all of a sudden, Sweden made an about face. And it was very strange. Sweden said, "Oh, we're not going to send these yet because we've been convinced by the West, by Washington, that we should all focus our resources on F-16s." But if you look at, for example, on X or Twitter, many European leaders were almost using the same language, as though they had the same playbook. Everyone was explaining, saying, "No, Sweden should not send their jets to Ukraine because we're all going to focus together on the F-16s."
Yeah, I mean, now, it's the same old tune. We've heard this in Poland when we wanted to send the Soviet-made MiGs to Ukraine, and we've heard that we cannot do it, so we came up with a plan of sending spare parts, all of them in one piece.
Yeah,
but that's the same case.
Well, but so here's where, like right now, the story seems, F-16s, certainly are going to be here soon. That's what everyone, the media and others and the White House and others are saying. Ukrainians have completed training in Denmark and France. In fact, when President Zelensky was flying through the Kingdom of Denmark, he was escorted by Ukrainian pilots in F-16. So the training's been done. But the thing is, until they're here, until they're in use, there's, I think we have a good reason to be very skeptical, because if you look at what happened, last summer, Washington said, oh, F-16, and by the way, so even if Denmark and other countries donate F-16s, Washington's permission is required because they're produced in America. So last summer, Washington said by September, F-16s will be in Ukraine. And then in September, they said by December. And back then the excuse was, oh, the Ukrainians need special training, even though F-16s are in use in Portugal, in Venezuela, all kinds of countries, Argentina. Ukrainians have proved themselves to be pretty good at fighting and pretty good at technology. So we saw all these excuses, and if you look at the headlines, it was almost every 3 months the can would get kicked down the road. So last December and early January, we were told, oh, F-16s by March. And now we're told, oh, F-16's imminent. But there's something funny about it. And I talked to friends who are F-16 pilots in America, retired F-16 pilots. They said the training was not, is not really the issue. One friend who was an F-16 pilot says, it seems that it was politically convenient to promise these while also being politically convenient to delay them as long as possible. And this is where, the question of motive, we can't answer that. We can only ask the question. But to me, it does seem from Washington, there's a sense that they do not want F-16s in Ukraine as long as there is a hot war, until there's some kind of partition and some kind of deal. And this is why the pressure.
So this is a fairy tale of F-16s that are not available for this on that reason, but the reality is it won't happen until we are going to have some kind of political settlement over there. And actually we hear on and on from different persons and different countries that this is what we should be expecting pretty soon.
I mean, we've heard this chatter, and the chatter is getting louder, but I heard it from people in Washington back in January saying that they thought, Kharkiv is a place that could be surrendered. They really think that. The people of Kharkiv disagree, but the experts think it, probably because, they don't want to have to, they want to keep things as, freedom requires courage, right? And so they want to avoid that. But that's the whole story of the Ukrainians. They keep proving the world wrong. And I think, like last year when they said F-16s by December, I think many people in Washington, as they did in 2022, they keep thinking, oh, there's no way these Ukrainians are still going to be holding on,
December, but which year?
Yeah, but yet they don't learn, but yet Ukrainians keep holding on. And this is, so look, I think, it's important, Ukrainians are grateful for, now they can use, for example, the HIMARS to hit the Russians. But it's important to look very closely and say, okay, why can't they use the ATACMS? And if you look at it that way, I mean, it still is possible that Washington is afraid of a Russian defeat. I mean, we've seen that language from the White House. And this is why I wish the press would ask better questions, because in 2022, Jake Sullivan said, we can't send ATACMS to Ukraine because we could have World War III, he said. Well, now ATACMS have been here for several months, and we see success. We see places being made. So someone needs to ask that question, because if you give politicians the benefit of the doubt, well, they'll say something, and then, okay, we're not allowed to question this for a few weeks. We should be happy. But then we see.
Okay, Joe, I do not think that we are going to answer this question, since we are asking this question for like 3 years almost, or 2.5 years. So definitely we are not going to find a solution today. But could you tell us what's the situation around Kharkiv right now? Because we've been talking about the new, I don't know even how to call it, another offensive or a counter-offensive to the counter-offensive by the Russians. We were talking about 50,000 troops amassed in the area of Kharkiv, and it looks like the thing is still, well, nothing really changed. So what do we know? You said that there is a difference in the level of pressure being imposed on Kharkiv. So what's the situation right now in terms of the Russian activity in the area?
Well, it's important to know that in these past weeks of the Russian incursion into the Kharkiv region, the Russians never got past Ukrainian defensive lines that were constructed away from the border. One of the reasons why is the Ukrainians, they couldn't put that at the border because they couldn't attack until they couldn't hit the Russians until the Russians invaded. But the Russians have not made significant progress in the past week there in terms of gaining ground. But what they have done, they've destroyed yet another city. The city of Volchansk, has been Bakhmuted. So they've been able to do that, and they've been able to hit so many places in Kharkiv City. They've really pounded the hell out of Kharkiv City. I mean, the attitude was very dark there as of Monday. I think the attitude's changed because of the news the Ukrainians can hit back. But Kharkiv is I mean, what has happened there? You know, I spent so much time in that city. What happened there the past weeks? What was a new level of terror was created. The intensity of the attacks, and there's so many stories of I mean, kids that have been killed. There's a famous medic, Cheka. She was 25, due to turn 26 2 days before she was killed in battle, and thousands of people just gathered in Kyiv to sing in her honor. But the losses of life have been very intense there in Kharkiv region. So the Russians haven't gained anything, but they haven't really gained much, but they've caused a hell of a lot of destruction. Now, I think that they were hoping they could break the spirit of that city and get people to leave. We don't see that happening. I know people were a little bit more nervous, but I didn't see a mass exodus. In fact, I know many people, including foreign volunteers, that have purposely traveled there in the past week. Now, the other big concern was that Russians might try to invade, like in the Sumy region, which is between Kyiv and Kharkiv. And until this permission was given from Washington, that was very scary because Ukrainians had to wait while Russians amassed troops. Now we see that Ukraine can do something before the Russians cross the line. And then within all this, it's important to note that Russians continue to do very precise attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure. It's bad. There's more and more power outages now throughout the country. After we had a pretty successful winter with power and no one had to use their generators, well, the Russians are really putting a hurt on the system. That is a major problem. We even, lately there's a lot of internet connectivity problems. The Russians are doing a lot of damage there. So that's something to watch. On the other hand, finally, I think people around the world are realizing what Ukraine has achieved in Crimea. Even The Economist said, well, I say even, The Economist said in Crimea, this is the headline, in Crimea, Ukraine is beating Russia. The peninsula is becoming a death trap for Russian soldiers. And indeed, because of Ukrainian drones, the sea drones, destroying more ships as they did last week, in one 24-hour period, they destroyed 7 more Russian ships of various sizes, including ferries that transport military gear. And they hit a Russian oil depot across on mainland Russia in the Kursk region.
But it's not a direct fight. I mean, they are being pounded by the airstrikes and long-range missiles by the Ukraine, but we do not see any significant change in terms of the control over Crimea.
No, but we see that the Russian Navy is very hazardous for any Russian ship to be anywhere around the coast of Crimea, including near the Kerch Bridge. We also had in mainland Russia, Ukrainians using drones, because the Ukrainians can do whatever they want with their own drones. They hit a convoy of 18 Russian trucks was destroyed on Russian mainland territory opposite the Kerch Bridge. Ukrainians did that using FPV drones. And look, I mean, we've seen the city of Odesa just about a month and a half ago was being routinely pounded. That's not happening to the same degree. And a lot of experts say, and people in the military say, I mean, Ukrainians have been able, using American ATACMS, using British weapons, and using drones and other things to hit the launch points and hit Russian radar in occupied Crimea. So maybe that has made Odessa safe. And this is the thing now to watch. Will we see Kharkiv region and city becoming safer now that Ukraine has this ability to go across the border? To shoot across the border.
Okay, Joe. So we got about 1 minute. So is there anything new regarding the level of support that people are sending through your NGO to the front line? What can we say about it? What is the thing that you are raising money for right now, and what are the things that people need over there? People who are fighting on the front line against the Putler's henchmen.
Well, I mean, it's on that score. I mean, it's extremely tough, and the mood is heavy. So many new people mobilized into the army. There's a big request frequently for drone jamming backpacks. So we're doing our best to get it, to people we know, to get that material. We now have a manufacturer somewhere in Ukraine that can do it for a very good price, about $1,500 per backpack. So we're working on those. We welcome support at UkrainianFreedomNews.com. And I think a big focus now is on drones, because the long-range weapons can come from America. But meanwhile, Ukraine has to do everything they can with drones. And we're seeing, whether it's in Kursk in mainland Russia, whether it's in occupied Crimea, and even, it was FPV Ukrainian drones, the kamikaze drones that Ukrainians use this past month to hold the line to keep the Russians from incurring from moving further into Kharkiv region. Now they not only have their own drones, also American HIMARS. But we'll keep helping the guys with drones. So UkrainianFreedomNews.com, we welcome support there. The PayPal option, because these drones are meant to stop the enemy, so it must be through PayPal.
Yeah, our viewers know it very well. There are two ways of supporting wire. One that is tax deductible, and the second, which is, of course, more expensive, but gives to all our viewers definitely much more satisfaction. The second option is not that cheap. It's not tax deductible, but it helps kicking Ruskies out of the territories they are trying to steal. So if our viewers do want to support Joe, they can do it in the way that Joe just described. Joe, thanks a lot. We see each other next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dziękuję.
Dziękuję. Stay safe. We see each other. Joe is going to be on our program next week. Ladies and gentlemen, you can join us on rackracon.com. That's our website. You can also click subscribe to our YouTube channel. We kindly request you to subscribe our YouTube channel, Rackracon YouTube channel. You can find it also on rackracon.com. We will provide you with all the interesting information that we tend to read, to look at, or the informations from the services, paid services that we buy to pass forward the most important takeaways of the information, like the one that we published yesterday about the German papers, government papers regarding Nord Stream. That can be found also on our Substack. So, see you soon. We come back with this program tomorrow.